So, we have moved into chapter 8 of Revelation. Chapter 8 begins with, and we're going to look at the first 6 verses. And it says, when he opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. And I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. Then another angel, having a golden censer, came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar, which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense, with the prayers of the saints, ascended before God from the angel's hand. Then the angel took a censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and threw it to the earth. And there were noises, thunderings, lightnings, and an earthquake. So the 7 angels, I forgot to change that, didn't I? So the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. Okay? Everybody got that?
No. What was the one you had up
Back
before?
up. The first one?
Yeah, I need to get that.
Okay. He, silence, half an hour, trumpets, altar, incense, prayers, and saints. Those are. Got it all, Betty?
Yes, sir.
Cindy, you got it?
Yes.
And everybody got that one? Fire and through? St. Francine was the only one who didn't have to. So Francine gets a blue star up here today.
Because he's the youngest mind in the class.
No, is that what it is?
I am.
All right, so when he opened the 7th seal, I just want to remind everybody, this is Jesus Christ who's opening the seals. Jesus Christ, the Lamb who takes the scrolls and opens the seals. Revelation 5. Remember, we made a big deal about that in Revelation 5. Because remember, John was asking, who's even worthy? Is there anybody here? And the angel told him, behold, the Lamb. And so the next thing I want to point out is that there was silence in heaven for half an hour. Now I want you to think about that because, to my knowledge, I could be wrong, but to my knowledge, this is the only time in which heaven, and in particular the throne room of heaven, is described as being silent. And you can compare Isaiah 6 and Ezekiel 1, Daniel chapter 7 verses 9 and 10, and Revelation chapters 4 and 5. When you look at these are all scenes throughout the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament. These are all scenes of the throne room of heaven. And nowhere that I know of is it ever described as being silent. What's one of the things that's always going on? We read it in Revelation chapter 4. I, John, I saw 24 thrones with 24 elders. Then I saw the 4 angels above the throne of God, guarding the throne. What's going on during that time when he's seeing all this? What's going on? Y'all remember? They're praising God, just continuously praising God. That's all that's going on. And you'll see that in a lot of these other scenes too, is they're praising God. But also, some of these scenes are more descriptive. And you'll see, like it says, there's flames of fire going on. Well, do you think flames of fire are quiet? Have you ever been around a fire? Have you ever been around a building that's burning? It's not quiet.
A bonfire as big as this room. There is.
Yeah, they're fire's not quiet. So my point is, that's something that should actually capture our attention, is that there's silence in heaven. Okay? And it says there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. The thing that got me about this is heaven's beyond space and time. They're beyond space and time, and yet somehow they're still in the counting of time. Even though God and all those angels, remember, even Satan can pop in and out. You know, the fallen angels, they can pop in and out of our dimension, so that they can't move forward in time, but they can pop in and out of our dimension. But when you think about heaven and God, he's beyond space and time.
But
And yet there's an
it's for
accounting.
us.
That's what I'm saying, but there's still an accounting of time. So I found that interesting. I don't know if y'all find it interesting or not. But again, it really just all goes back to the fact that all of a sudden, for the first time, and if anybody knows of any other place where it says that heaven was silent, I'd like to know about it. I mean, honestly, because I think, again, that that's a pretty big deal, that all of a sudden, heaven is silent. Okay? And it says the 7 angels were given 7 trumpets. See, last time we had a lesson, I had y'all fill in a whole bunch of blanks. So this time I took it easy on you, right? And the word for trumpets is actually, go figure, a trumpet. Okay? But there's a significance because trumpets actually have various uses. They can be used to play beautiful music. And a lot of that can depend on your idea of what's beautiful music. But they're used in the making of important announcements. How many of you have seen those, like Robin Hood or whatever movies, and the guy in the city square goes to make an announcement? What do? They blow the trumpets, right? And then he's like, hear ye, right? So trumpets are used for that. They're also used for heralding important people. And we still see this today, actually. Now, today they've moved more towards entire bands doing that. But what happens when the president comes into the room? What do they play? It's called Ruffles and Flourishes. I think that's what it's called. Dun, da, da, dun, da, da, dun, dun, da, da, dun, da, da, dun. And they play that 5 times? I think it's 5. It's at least 4. They play it, I think, 5 times. And then a lot of times they'll go into Hail to the Chief. Right? Dun, dun, da, dun, dun, da, da, right? Heralding important persons. And the United States is by far not the only country that still does this. And if you watched any of the D-Day Memorial back in June in France, if you watched any of that, as each of these heads of state came up, there was music playing for them. Okay? So that's something else that trumpets are used for. But one of the most critical uses of trumpets, not anymore, but all the way up and through World War I, trumpets were used for battle. And they were used to signal various different signals. From the attack to, if I want my right flank to move in, this trumpeter will trumpet a specific set of notes. If I want my left flank, this trumpeter will trumpet a specific set of notes. Trumpeters were used in battle. They used flags and they used trumpets. Because you think about it and you look, when you're reading your Bible and you see about these armies come together, look at how many men were in these armies. Right? When the Assyrian army came to attack Jerusalem, how many men did the angel of the Lord kill? 185,000. And that wasn't the entire army. That was not the entire army. When Persia tried to invade Greece, they brought a 1,000,000-man army. They did not have all the electronics that we have today. How do you control an army with hundreds of thousands to millions of people? You have to have a way that all these soldiers know what to do. And it's done through trumpets.
A Gideon, this thing, and then fox hunts.
Yeah.
They trumpet.
They trumpet. Yes, they do. They would trumpet to try and drive the fox out, but they would also trumpet to, oh, I found the fox. They have different little musical blurbs that they play for each thing, made up of different notes. And even, you think about it, what is reveille? And what plays reveille? It's a trumpet, taps. What instrument plays taps? It's always a trumpet. So, this is very important. Why would this be so important? Any ideas?
They could hear it.
Yeah, but
Sure,
why would it be
everybody.
important that trumpets are used on the battlefield? We got 7 angels getting ready with 7 trumpets. Give you something to think about while we continue on here. Each sounding of these 7 trumpets is the signaling of a battlefield maneuver. Did you ever think about it that way?
Like the steps, like what gets done first and
Well,
second.
that's exactly it. Remember I said, when you have these armies, a trumpeter, the general in charge will tell the trumpeter, play this, and he'll play it. And then this part of the army knows what to do. And he'll tell, play this, and he'll play it. And this part of the army knows what to do. And that's what we're seeing right here. Each sounding of these 7 trumpets is the signaling of a battlefield maneuver which pours out the wrath of God one step at a time. And one can compare these trumpet events to a modern-day battlefield in which artillery is used to soften a targeted objective before ground forces move in. You think about that. And really, you think about where you saw it the most and the biggest. If you watch any World War I or World War II footage, what did they always do before the infantry moved up? There's always an artillery barrage. And both sides did it. Both sides did it. But you can see it, especially if you watch anything of like the War in the Pacific. You'll see when they were getting ready to do invasion of an island, what would happen? The battleships and the heavy cruisers, they would all just unleash. Those battleships, 16-inch guns. That means the shell that's coming out of there is 16 inches around. And by the way, each one of those weighed about 2,000 pounds. And going in and just totally destroying everything that was around before the Marines went and made their landing. Softening up the enemy. That's what you're going to see these 7 trumpets are doing, is they're softening up the enemy. Now back in the day of John, and prior to gunpowder, obviously they didn't have artillery. Who did that job? It's up there, by the way. Who did that job? You know who was always the first to attack in a battle?
Archers.
The archers. The archers and the slingers. Because they'd get thousands of archers, and they just, not even aim, just. And that's what made, like the Romans, prior to the Romans, most shields were round circles. When the Romans came along, they made these long rectangular shields. And they did that for a reason, so that they could actually hide behind them. And the guys in the front had their shields around, and then the guys behind all put their shields on the top to totally make that barrage of arrows useless. That was the whole point of doing that. And again, You can watch on some historical movies, you can watch and see this in action. What's the one, the Mel Gibson one where he's the Scottish guy? What's that? No. Huh? Braveheart. If you watch Braveheart and you watch the battle scenes, you'll see exactly that's what it looked like. All the archers on one side, and all the other guys on the other side. As soon as they see the arrows coming in, they duck behind their shields. But they got those little round shields, so a lot of them were getting hit anyway. That's why the Romans went to the shields they went to. Okay, so archers and slingers used to be the artillery of the battlefield back in this day. So then you have another angel who came and stood at the altar. Which altar did he stand before? He stood before the altar of incense. How do I know that he stood before the altar of incense? Well, because it says he was given much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar which was before the throne. Okay. Oh, maybe you can't see that by now? Everybody got that? Did I put it up there? I did put it up there. And notice, it says, of all the saints, notice how a saint is defined. Saint is defined as most holy. Remember, God told us to be holy. Why? It says, be ye holy because I am holy. Okay? So he considers us holy. What are the prayers of all the saints? We read the primary prayer of all the saints. In Revelation 6, this was the fifth seal, the seal of the martyrs. And I know this was the martyrs. Well, what is the prayer of all the saints? Are we not all praying? What did Jesus tell his disciples to pray? Started out with our Father, but let's go to the end.
Thy kingdom come.
Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. I shouldn't have said the end, but let's go to what's next. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. What does that mean? Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. When is that going to happen? When is that going to happen? Where God's will is immediately done, just like it's done in heaven. Do we immediately do God's will right now? Mm-hmm. Some of us are better at it than others, but there's a lot of times where we struggle, or where we refuse, whatever. There's going to be a day where God's will be done on earth exactly as it's done in heaven. When will that day be? Well, when Jesus rules and reigns on earth during the millennium, it says he rules with a rod of iron. What does that mean? It's his will, his way, right now. And oh yeah, if you want to object to me, see ya. Remember, we've talked about, I believe it's in Isaiah, I have to look it up again, but it says, if somebody dies before they're 100, people are going to say, he was a sinner. He was going against God's will. Okay. So, what is the prayer of all the saints? To judge and avenge. To judge and avenge for our blood. And what's God's answer to them? This is a long one, and you're not going to have a lot to write until the very end. But it's interesting that God answered this prayer long before anyone ever prayed it. You can find it in Deuteronomy 32. It's called the Song of Moses. But he says, give ear, O heavens, and I will speak, and hear, O earth, the words of my mouth. Let my teaching drop as the rain, my speech distill as the dew, as raindrops on the tender herb, and as showers on the grass. For I proclaim the name of the Lord, ascribe greatness to our God. He is the rock, his work is perfect, for all his ways are justice. A God of truth and without injustice, righteous and upright is he. They have corrupted themselves, and they are not his children. Who's he talking about? They have corrupted themselves, and they are not his children. Because of their blemish, a perverse and crooked generation, do you thus deal with the Lord, O foolish and unwise people? Is he not your father who bought you? Has he not made you and established you? Now here again, how are God's people bought? By the blood of Jesus Christ. Again, see, this prayer was answered long before it even happened. Okay? Remember the days of old, consider the years of many generations. Ask your father, and he will show you, your elders, and they will tell you. When the Most High divided their inheritance to the nations, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the boundaries of the peoples, according to the number of the angels of God, for the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is the place of his inheritance. I'm underlining this because you notice there's people who are not God's people, and then there are people who are his people. And we were told back in Genesis, when God called Abraham out, I called you out for my own. And we talk about the 70 nations. You can find that in Genesis, where the list of the 70 nations. Okay? And all those were given over to those fallen angels to be worshipped as gods, remember? We've talked about this, and I'm underlining this because I want us to never forget the spiritual aspect of what's going on. So many of us, both because it's the times we live in where everything's, scientific and everything's digital and computer and all that, but also if we're in the West, we don't tend to think in terms of spiritual. We don't tend to think that way. The guys who wrote the Bible did. Obviously God does. God is a spirit. So I want you to keep in mind that, remember, all these nations that are going to be coming up against Israel, who's driving them? Who's leading them?
Those angels.
Those angels.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
Were those angels had they already turned against God when God assigned them these 70 sections, or did they turn after?
No, he gave them rule over them, and they turned.
After.
It could have been after. Very well. Again, and we've talked about this in the past. We don't know exactly. We know Satan fell when? Probably before
Creation.
Man was created, right? And before creation. And like we tend to think that the angels were created at the same time as everything else. But that's not true, because Job tells us that the angels, the sons of God, sang and rejoiced when God made creation. So the angels were already created before what we consider creation. Okay? So Satan fell before that. Did he take all 1/3 with him at that time? I don't know. I don't think so, honestly. I think some of them joined in later on. And it could be some of these fell when they said, oh, we've got an entire nation that we get to be in charge of. Let's do what we want. I'm going to be their God. I think that's what I think happened. But there's no way to say whether that's what happened or not.
Well, God didn't take out Satan and got to get rid of him.
No, he did not.
It could be the same type of thing.
And remember, look,
It's a
you
choice.
have the watcher angels. When did they sin? Well, the only time we know when they sinned is when they came down and made a covenant to mate with humans. Okay. Did they sin before that? Had they already turned from God before that? We don't know. We don't know. So it's a possibility that these angels turned when God gave them charge over these nations. On the other hand, I think God in this case, now I just said I think they could have turned, but on the other hand, God could have already given them two fallen angels and said, here, let's see what you do with them. And I'm gonna have my people come out of this one guy, and then you watch and see what I do with them. That's a very valid possibility too. So,
I'm teaching Abraham now in class, and it's just, you really think about it, it's baffling that at the Tower of Babylon, that this one man, his father was an idol worshiper,
yes.
but yet he and his wife worshiped the one true God. It's like, how did that happen?
Well, and
You
it
know,
was,
it's amazing.
yes, it is amazing, and it wasn't easy too, because especially when you think about Jacob, you know, now we're talking about Abraham's grandson, Jacob, and then he went to marry, and yet, what did his wife, the wife he wanted, what did she do? Remember? She stole the idols. Okay? This was a long, complex thing. It was not an instantaneous. Yes, Abraham obeyed. And by the way, there's a lot about Babylon and Abraham that we've been wrong on too. But anyway, let me go on. He found in him a desert. He found him in a desert, and now he's talking about Abraham, in a desert land, in the wasteland, a howling wilderness. He encircled him, he instructed him, he kept him as the apple of his eye. As an eagle stirs up its nest, it hovers over its young, spreading out its wings, taking them up, carrying them on its wings. So the Lord alone led him, and there was no foreign God with him. He made him ride in the heights of the earth, that he might eat the produce of the fields. He made him draw honey from the rock, and oil from the flinty rock, curds from the cattle, and milk of the flock, with fat of lambs and rams of the breed of Bashan, and goats with the choicest wheat. And you drank wine in the blood of grapes. Notice the Bashan there. Remember, that's a bad area. That's actually where Abraham came out of, was that area. Okay? But Jeshurun grew fat and kicked. You grew fat, you grew thick, you are obese. Remember, this is Moses writing this, and he's talking about Israel after they've taken over the land. It's already prophesied that this is what's going to happen. Then he forsook God who made him, and scornfully esteemed the rock of his salvation. They provoked him to jealousy with foreign gods. With abominations they provoked him to anger. They sacrificed to demons, not to God. To gods they did not know, to new gods, new arrivals that your fathers did not fear. Of the rock who begot you, you are unmindful and have forgotten the God who fathered you. And when the Lord saw it, he spurned them because of the provocation of his sons and daughters. And he said, I will hide my face from them. I will see what their end will be, for they are a perverse generation, children in whom there is no faith. They have provoked me to jealousy by what is not God. They have moved me to anger by their foolish idols. But I will provoke them to jealousy by those who are not a nation. I will move them to anger by a foolish nation, for their fire is kindled in my anger, and shall burn to the lowest hell. It shall consume the earth with her increase, and set on fire the foundations of the mountains. Oh, what's he talking about here? My fire is kindled in anger, burn to the lowest hell, consume the earth with their increase, set fire to the foundations. What's he talking about there? That's it. Yep, that's an end times prophecy right there. Remember, the flood had already happened. What did God promise to Noah after the flood? I will never again destroy the earth by what? Water. How will it be destroyed?
Fire.
Fire. This is an end times prophecy going on right here. I will heap disasters on them. I will spend my arrows on them. What did we just talk about? Remember with the trumpets and how trumpets were used in battle. Today we use the artillery to soften things up. What did they use back in that time? They used the arrows. What's he talking about? I will heap disasters on them. I will spend my arrows on them. Okay? Are you seeing the battlefield come out now? They shall be wasted with hunger, devoured by pestilence and bitter destruction. I will also send against them the teeth of beasts with the poison of serpents of the dust. Have you read what happens in Revelation chapter 8 and chapter 9? Have you read that? How many remember about the locust in Revelation? Remember that? The locust, and they sting, and the men are tormented. Man is tormented for 5 months, and for 5 months they can't die even when they want to. Let's see, what he's talking about. Okay? The sword shall destroy outside. There shall be terror within for the young man and virgin, the nursing child with the man of gray hairs. I would have said, I will dash them in pieces. I will make the memory of them to cease from among men. Had I not feared the wrath of the enemy, lest their adversaries should misunderstand. Excuse me. Lest they should say, our hand is high, and it is not the Lord who has done all this. All right. For they are a nation void of counsel, nor is there any understanding in them. All that they were wise, that they understood this, that they would consider their latter end. How could one chase 1,000 and two put 10,000 to flight, unless their rock had sold them, and the Lord had surrendered them? For their rock is not like our rock, even our enemies themselves being judges. For their vine is the vine of Sodom, and the fields and of the fields of Gomorrah. Their grapes are grapes of gall. Their clusters are bitter. Their wine is the poison of serpents, and the cruel venom of cobras. Is this not laid up in store with me, sealed up among my treasures? Vengeance is mine, and recompense. Their foot shall slip in due time, for the day of their calamity is at hand, and the things to come hasten upon them. You see, this is an end times prophecy that Moses wrote. And he goes on, for the Lord will judge his people and have compassion on his servants. When he sees their power is gone and there is no one remaining, free or bond or free, he will say, and okay, I underline this because you think about this. What does Revelation 12 say? When Satan comes down, when Satan is cast out of heaven, and he comes down to the earth, and what does it say? He's going to fight against who? He's going to fight against God's people, and he's going to overtake them. He's going to overwhelm them. Okay? And this is what he's saying. When he sees that their power is gone, and there is no one remaining, bond or free, the persecution of the saints will be that bad. Now see that I, even I, am he, and there is no God besides me. I kill and I make alive, I wound and I heal, nor is there any who can deliver from my hand? For I raise my hand to heaven and say, as I live forever, if I whet my glittering sword and my hand takes hold on judgment, I will render vengeance to my enemies and repay those who hate me. I will make my arrows drunk with blood, and my sword shall devour flesh with the blood of the slain and the captives, from the heads of the leaders of the enemy. Rejoice, O Gentiles, with his people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants and render vengeance to his adversaries. He will provide atonement for his land and his people. Here again, I've underlined, but I want you to see, who's he telling to rejoice? Remember that God's plan of salvation was never just for the Jews. It was to come through Israel. It was never just for Israel. Salvation was to come through Israel to the Gentile nations. Okay? And he's saying, rejoice, Gentiles, with his people Israel, because he's going to avenge the blood of who? Yeah, he didn't say, I will avenge the blood of Israel. He said, I will avenge the blood of my servants. That's different. Now, I guess we can finish. We're already over, right?
Amen.
Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and threw it to the earth. Fire, yeah. What is fire? Fire is a form of judgment. Fire is a form of judgment. And I've got one of these highlighted. I want to look it up. Let's look up Numbers 11. He said, now when the people complained, it displeased the Lord, for the Lord heard it, and his anger was aroused. So what happened? Numbers 11, verses 1 and 2. Now when the people complained, it displeased the Lord, for the Lord heard it, and his anger was aroused. So the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed some in the outskirts of the camp. Then they cried out to Moses, and when Moses prayed to the Lord, the fire was quenched. So he called the name of the place Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burned among them. What is fire? Fire is judgment. Also want you to look at Numbers 21:6, because this is another one. And here, this one, once again, actually gets into the spiritual aspect, again, of what's going on. Okay? I'm going to start in verse 1, just so that we have what's going on. The king of Arab, verse 4, so that we can see what's going on. Then they journeyed from Mount Hor by the way of the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom, and the soul of the people became very discouraged on the way. And people spoke against God and against Moses. Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no food and no water, and our soul loathes this worthless bread. So then the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and many of the people of Israel died. I want y'all to know that those weren't just snakes, and that those weren't like asps, poisonous asps. These were spiritual beings. These were spiritual beings. And that's why they're fiery serpents. You know, there's a class of angels that are described as serpents. You should know that because we know one of them by name. What's his name? Lucifer. He's a serpent. And his class. And when you read about the class of these angels and how they're described, you will see that some of them have serpent-like. That's what they look like. Okay. Then the angel took the fire and filled it with fire from the altar and threw it to the earth. This word "threw," it actually means to throw it without caring where it lands. Right? This is not baseball where you're trying to get into the strike zone. This is, he just throws it, and wherever it lands, it lands. Why is that? Why is that? This act signals that God's wrath is about to fall on the entire earth. And that's why it's thrown without care. It's only thrown down to the earth, but it's thrown without care. But what I want y'all to keep in mind, always keep in mind, is the spiritual aspect of this. You know, and again, read in, is it 8 or 9? I think it's in 9 where it talks about the locusts. Read those locusts. Read about them. These are spiritual beings. This is not like some people try and say, oh, this is like the Apache helicopter. No, it's not. No, it's not. Not at all. Read about the horsemen. Have y'all noticed about the horsemen? Have y'all noticed that part of the horsemen that come up, part of their danger is in their tails? Since when is a horse's tail dangerous? These are spiritual beings that we're talking about. We cannot forget about the spiritual aspect of all of this. And we got to remember that all of this is a war not against man. Who's it a war against? Satan and the fallen angels and their demonic offspring. And any man who decides to follow them and turn away from God. That's who it's a war against. But if you're going to have a war against spiritual beings, can I pull out my gun and shoot a spirit? No, it's not going to have any effect on it. So what needs to happen? You have to have spiritual weapons to fight against spirits. So keep that in mind. But also keep in mind that they can affect us. They can affect us. Again, those locusts, their tails have stingers, but they can sting, and it will torment a man for 5 months. And he'll try to die. Man won't even be able to commit suicide during that time. Can you imagine that? Of all the ways that we have to commit suicide, and it won't work. You know, I try and imagine that sometimes. Hey, I'll go up to the Empire State Building and jump off. Oh, well, guess what? Either you're not gonna get up there, or somebody's gonna catch you and let you down gently. You think about that, okay? Because how often do we think about things like that? I'm gonna try to kill myself, but I'm not even gonna be allowed to do that. Well, what's to stop that? That's a spiritual power. Stopping that. Okay. So I just want to keep in mind the spiritual aspect. And